Hi, I'm Fran, the Client Development Specialist at Lánluas. Today I'm joined by Dan Shay, our TechOne Enterprise Content Management Specialist. Dan is here to share his expertise on ECM and provides insights on improved ways of working for your organisation.
Hi everyone, I'm Dan and I'm keen to share what's happening in the ECM world. Today we'll talk a little bit about the organisations and what we've found they're currently focusing on. These might be things such as quick wins, challenges, and maybe even some complications of not investing in ECM within an ERP.
Perfect. Some of those may not be familiar, so if you could highlight what is ECM and why is it important for organisations?
The ECM is TechnologyOne's enterprise content management system, which centralizes the organization's files. They might be things such as documents themselves, or maybe videos, audio files, emails, any sort of actual file that you can transfer into a digital format. Most of the time, we find organizations leave ECM to just run by itself, and this is usually left to teams such as the records team. But the organizations and the innovators that are really doing well with ECM and getting the most out of it are making executive level and collaborative decisions together so that all the departments can come together and get the most out of ECM.
So if you were saying that ECM connects the whole organization throughout the TechOne ERP system, is ECM then key to improving organization-wide business objectives?
Yeah, many organizations set out their business objectives by improving employee satisfaction, productivity, and efficiency. To achieve that, you need a good understanding of how ECM sits within the TechnologyOne suite. So that might be using business process automation, reporting and analytics, and just understanding how all of the entities within the ECM and TechnologyOne suite sit together.
Do you have any real-life examples of how we've achieved those business objectives?
So with a client in Victoria that we were working with during a project engagement for a transformational plan they had in mind, so they engaged with us and it was mostly about the efficiencies within the business using ECM. So it was not just the records team, it was all parts of the business, how they've got files, how they get them into ECM, how do we get further classification for those files as automatic as possible, how do we generate relevant tasks with tracking and report on all of that. So it was a whole process-driven type of improvement plan. We first focused on ad hoc tasking. So for example, when you have a document in ECM, you can assign a task to the document. We built abilities to provide more information on the task, set deadlines, mention whether or not it needs to be approved, be able to trigger notifications to people, and resource pools. We can bring that in instead of just assigning to users. You can assign to resource pools that can then claim or reallocate tasks. That process is driven by a dynamic form. So when you're assigning the task, you've got all the options there. You can provide different and specify different options. And with that, it will go off and based on logic, it will then create the task, whether or not it needs to be approved. And there's a lot of automation there, but all the customer or the user sees is going to a document and submitting a form, and that gets assigned as required using the form information.
Great. So that sounds like a great win for efficiency and client satisfaction as well, and making sure that they're investing in the longevity of their system and process improvement.
By having one form and just the one BPA process, and maybe one little T script that would make a change to the document if needed as part of the process. There was only one of each item, so then in future to maintain it, they don't have, for example, some customers have 30 BPAs just to be able to account for all the different types of tasks, whereas they can just have the ad hoc tasks or template tasks that they use. And it's just a simple submit the form, it gets assigned and creates the task, and then any notifications or approvals as well come off of that as well. So maintenance moving forward is reduced because they've just got the one, and also user experience, they're able to just fill in a form, and it's much easier having some logic to then decide the different fields that appear on the form based on options, and you can have more logic on the form itself so you can guide the user on how they're meant to be assigning the task. And it's also getting the most value out of the product because we hand this over to the customer, show them how it works, and set it up in a way where they can make quite a large number of changes themselves to keep working with that existing 2 or 3 items that we've built for them. They can keep working with that until it gets to a point where they might need significant configuration. And if they're unable to do that themselves, then that's when we can come back and help further.
So it's helping with collaboration across teams so that they're not working in silos. The whole process is improved. Am I right?
Yeah, what tends to happen there is that the records team or a certain department will ask for this. For example, there is a workplace health and safety part of the business for this customer, and they were the ones that initially needed something like this. And then other departments see what workplace health and safety people are doing. So then finance might ask for something. It gets to a point where there's a lot of collaboration within the business, and they start also thinking that was easier to do this part. And how about we start thinking about this process and these challenges over here? And you can actually start to see the wheels start turning with the customer, where they start understanding that they can do what they need to be able to do, and their options are there. It's just a matter of having that first basis of getting that built and then going on from there and being able to start adapting that within the business and growing it further.
It sounds great, the work you've achieved to help this organisation improve and make improvements for not only their processes, but the end users as well, and the people that are using the system. Whilst we're on that topic of thinking about the end user, is there anything special about our training offering?
With our training, we can do formal structured training, which would mostly be a case of we step through the general roles or tasks that users need to do and step through the product of ECM as a whole. So we go from top to bottom and go through everything and make sure nothing's left untouched. At the end of it, the customer should have a good idea of exactly where everything is and what it's for. And then there's tailored or ad hoc training, where depending on the challenges or gaps in the business for knowledge, we can do ad hoc training, and they're usually really successful because customers focus on what they want to focus on. They don't have to take 2 days off to cover a whole lot of training when they only need that half day, and the other half of the day can also be just showing them some tips and tricks as well. They get more out of it. If they aren't new to ECM, ad hoc training is really great.
I've sat in classrooms before and gone to a training session and learnt nothing. So I think that practical application, really understanding and teaching them what's going to help them with their day-to-day is the best kind of win. If employees don't know how to get the most out of your system, then your system's only as good as it can operate. We need our staff to use it to the best of its ability. Thinking about the other business objectives that we talked about or discussed is improvements around customer experience. So a lot of clients, particularly in the local government space, want to improve the customer experience. And we know that's a common theme across all the areas we work in, Australia, New Zealand, the UK and Ireland. Is there anything we can do with ECM that can help with that?
The biggest thing is with ECM, we try to make a proactive approach to compliance. So with the user experience side, you've got all your improvements you can do within your processes and streamline efficiencies. But the other side is proactiveness. So what we want to do is make sure that, yes, part of setting up ECM would be your retention and disposal schedules, making sure you're aligning with policies, and is VERS set up if you're in Victoria and stuff like that? Are you doing social media? The other part is making sure what you have set up is compliant. And because of the way that ECM works with connected content, you also have a lot of stuff coming through from other parts of TechOne that aren't ECM, but come in as attachments to ECM automatically if you've set up connected content right. And that creates a lot of traffic, like we're talking hundreds, maybe even thousands of documents a week that no one's reviewing manually. It's all automatic based on some configuration and connected content. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that classification is happening as intended and it does align with your records policies, because otherwise you might have a year's worth or 7 years worth of documents at 1,000 or a couple of hundred documents a week. That's a lot to get through if you get audited. So what we try to do is call these things out with the customer. We've also got some common approaches that we'll do to combat that. So proactive weekly or scheduled reports that they can run that will tell them if a document's not connected to a certain index, and making sure documents meet the classification relevant to that organization so they don't have surprises when they get audited.
Sounds like there was a lot that we could support with on the compliance side. Is there anything that we can do to help with faster ways of working or improve ways of working? Just thinking about that customer experience side.
One main focus is extracting value from ECM and their platform, but it's also empowering users to start thinking for themselves and just arming them with enough knowledge so they can think about how they're looking for things, how they can access things, how they can do things in bulk and all that sort of stuff. One of the big things that we focus on is sometimes we'll spend a whole day just showing the customer how to use ECM search and all of the different ways that you can create customized grids, save views, export saves, and make bulk changes to these sorts of filters. So one of the main things is focusing on rapid collection or searching so that they can understand that if they're on the call with the customer, for example, someone's calling up about their rates notice, we can show the fastest way to pinpoint documents related to that customer within that time frame and stuff like that. They should be able to be doing this on the call with the customer, and it should be maybe 5 or 10 clicks and we can get them there. And while they're working with the customer, it's just a nice easy flow. They don't have to take the message, go back, try and find the documents, and then try and call the customer back and miss calls. They usually get to a stage where they do all this on the fly, quick and easy.
Which helps everyone. We've all been on those calls where we've been put on hold or something takes a while, not only for the experience for the customer, but also the person that's handling that call being able to effectively or more efficiently do their job. Just makes a nicer environment for everyone.
We find that the happier people are using a product, the more inclined they are to improve and uplift what they're using day to day. I don't see too many people getting excited about records management and document management, but with ECM, you are able to empower them more and they get a lot more proactive and excited to do things quicker and faster. It's great.
It's great to learn this knowledge because I didn't realize how much ECM could help. These small little changes have such a big impact on employees, customers, business objectives. It's really actually quite insightful to hear. One thing we talked about before was data models and common view types. Did you want to share a little on that?
With data models and ETLs, you can schedule or automate a lot of background processing. So we're not really talking about the user manually stepping through a process here. It's mostly just background processing with ETLs and stuff like that. And providing you've got the TechnologyOne licensing, with ETLs, there are a lot of different things that you can do. You can create reports, run them, send them to people. TechOne also has a playlist function. So the customer will come to us asking for a report. We can show them how we do it, how they can schedule it in playlists without even touching ETLs as well. But if they need further automation around changes being made to entities, like you might want to update a document, for example, based on where it's come from, or do some additional tasking or anything like that, then ETLs give us the power to make more in the background. Scheduled items and regular processes that happen in the background are great with ETLs. It just comes down to what would they like to do. But again, custom configuration in ETLs is something that I'd consider the last resort if the product doesn't do what it is designed to do natively, because we always like to keep the customer on that track of using the product as it's designed and intended. Then if it doesn't meet requirements and you have a few extra things you need to iron out, then we step into custom configuration of ETLs. We think that's the best approach because we don't create that redundant investment of custom configuration that it becomes null and void in a few years' time. By keeping them on the track of using the product, then they avoid all that sort of stuff, which is good for them in the long run. It's a good outcome for the customer when they're not investing so much in something that probably won't be used in a few years' time or it could change.
One thing we haven't covered or haven't talked about is connected content. I know connected content is quite big within ECM. Do you want to share a little about what it is and things that we could consider if there are any risks or? the benefits?
So with connected content, I'd usually describe that as a fabric feature within TechnologyOne. So within TechOne, you might have property and rating, finance, student management, all that sort of stuff. And those separate products will be considered in different silos in connected content. For example, you might have property and rating, and that would have your property entity, customer entity, all that stuff. And you've got your attachment grid there, any documents that go on that grid. Connected content will, if configured correctly, will grab that document from the attachment grid, bring it into ECM, register it accordingly based off of your connected content config that's set up. The main thing customers need to be aware of, and sometimes it may get missed in implementations, is the initial setup of connected content configuration. If you have your property teams, your finance teams, all adding documents to these attachment grids, if connected content is turned on and it's not configured properly, then you have a lot of documents automatically getting picked up by ECM and being registered. But again, it comes back to that classification side of things where it's just ingesting all of these documents and it's not doing it correctly. Because it's coming in via connected content, the classification, if there's not much there, it's hard to clean up and start looking at, okay, these 1,000 documents we need to do this with, these 10,000 we need to do this with, and it becomes a big project to get it cleaned up before you can even start looking at setting up connected content properly. So we do try and call that out, as well as if the customer has connected content, let's make sure that if it is turned on, it's turned on and set up properly. Otherwise, we can keep it turned off if it's an implementation, for example, and we can come back to it in 2 or 3 months' time. The documents will still be there, ready to be registered by ECM. We can come back and do connected content config as a separate project. Make sure we avoid that potential mess. There are a few customers in that position, and they've got, I think it's close to 800,000 documents just waiting to be classified properly. That's the sort of thing we like to avoid.
That sounds like a great top tip and a great risk to maybe avoid. So if I was an organization with connected content, I think that would be very helpful to not have 8,000 documents to look at. And it also reflects our partnership model as well, so that we collaborate with clients, we understand their environment. There are areas where, like you say, Dan, you recommend your expertise or an ECM specialist to set up or configure, but there are actually areas that we can empower the client to manage ECM and manage their document and recording management themselves. So I think that works really well. That we actually use our knowledge to guide and advise rather than do everything.
Yeah, that's definitely the approach we take. We want to empower them to be knowledgeable about the system and be able to feel confident in making decisions themselves and doing some config, setting things up in a way where it's not a roadblock in there where setting it up so in such a convoluted manner that no one will understand it. They need to come back to us. That's not really what we like. We make sure things are set up. They know how to use it. It's adaptable, so it's versatile if they want to use it somewhere else. And just that general collaborative approach and doing a good handover with the customer if we're doing setup for them and custom config is to make sure that we provide documentation and that anyone in the customer's team could pick up, perhaps the IT team, they could pick it up and understand how it's put together and make some extra changes to keep using and getting the most out of that investment in the future without having to come back to us. But at the same time, we like it when the customer comes back to us, but we want that to be a case of because they need more training or they have additional work that they need done, not the small changes. We like to make sure the customer can do that themselves.
That's great. Thanks, Dan. This conversation around ECM has been immensely helpful to me, but I'm sure to everybody else as well. I just would like to finish with that. If anyone does have any questions or you'd like to discuss any plans or ideas or get some more information on ECM, you can reach out to us at info@lánluas.com.au and we'll post our details below. Feel free to contact us at any time. So thanks, Dan, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thanks, Fran.